The first time I saw my mother sign my name to give away my son, she was smiling like she was doing me a favor. I was standing in the doorway of a downtown law office, with my work badge still clipped to my blouse and my purse hanging off one shoulder, breathing hard from running up 2 flights of stairs because the elevator had been out. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I could see her neatly manicured hand guiding a silver pen across a stack of custody papers. My father sat beside her with his jaw clenched tight, one hand resting on a legal folder as if he were guarding treasure. Across from them, a young attorney in a gray suit was talking in the calm, polished voice people use when they think the worst part is already over. "Just initial there," he said, tapping the page. "And here. Once the notary finishes, we can move the filing forward this afternoon." My mother nodded, eyes soft with that fake sympathy she used when she wanted to stab you politely. "We're only doing what's best for Noah." Noah, my 6-year-old son. My son whose lunchbox I packed every morning before work. My son who still slept with the blue blanket his father had bought him the week before cancer took him away. My son whose custody they were trying to transfer while I was stuck on the night shift at the hospital billing office, trying to keep our lights on and our life together. The notary was already opening the stamp. I pushed the door hard enough that it bounced against the wall. "Don't you dare sign another thing." Every head in the room snapped toward me. The pen slipped from my mother's fingers and rolled across the polished table. My father's face drained of color, but only for a second. Then he did what he always did when he was caught. He turned angry. "What are you doing here?" he barked, like I was the one interrupting something normal. I stared at the papers spread between them. A petition for emergency guardianship. A second form requesting temporary custody. A third document with my name typed at the bottom, and a signature line already marked with an elegant, fake scrawl that was supposed to be mine. I felt the room tilt. "Who signed that?" I asked, my voice so quiet it scared even me. The attorney stood halfway, startled. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No," I said, walking in farther. "I think there's been a crime." My mother stood too quickly, placing a hand over her chest in the old martyr pose she used whenever she wanted the world to think she was fragile. "Claire, calm down. We were going to explain." "Explain what?" I shot back. "That you were about to hand my child over like he's a houseplant?" "Watch your mouth," my father snapped. I laughed once, sharp and bitter. "Or what? You'll tell me I'm ungrateful? You'll tell me I've become selfish since Daniel died? You'll tell me I work too much, so that means I don't deserve my own son?" Nobody spoke. Because they had. For months. For years, really. And the cruel thing was that until that moment, I had still believed there had to be some line they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. I'm Claire Monroe, and before all of this happened, I thought I already knew what betrayal looked like. I thought it came in obvious forms, with screaming and slammed doors and dramatic exits. I thought it looked like strangers. I thought it looked like enemies. I didn't know betrayal could be wearing your mother's perfume. I was 32 when my husband Daniel died. We had been married 9 years, and for most of them, life had been ordinary in the way people pray for without realizing it. Not easy, not perfect, but ordinary. We had a small 2-bedroom house on the east side of Columbus, a minivan that made a rattling sound whenever the air conditioner kicked on, and a son who loved dinosaurs, cereal with too much sugar, and watching construction trucks from the front window. Daniel was the kind of man who always came home with the right thing in his hands. Not expensive things, just the right thing. A bag of my favorite chips, because he noticed I'd had a hard day. A little screwdriver set, because one of the cabinet handles had come loose. A small flashlight for Noah's nightstand, after he went through a phase where he was afraid of the dark. He died in a work accident on a rainy Thursday in October. 1 minute, he was at a site outside Dayton, checking a faulty support beam. The next, he was gone. The official words were traumatic blunt force injury. The real words were that my son and I had to learn how to breathe in a world that had suddenly become too big and too cold. Daniel left me a house that still smelled like his cologne in the closet, a modest life insurance policy, and a trust fund set aside for Noah that his employer helped establish after the settlement. It wasn't a fortune. It wasn't some huge, movie-style inheritance. It was enough to make sure Noah would have college money someday. Maybe a down payment on a starter home. Maybe a little cushion if life got cruel again. I treated that money like sacred ground. My parents treated it like a family resource. That was the first crack. My father, Richard Monroe, retired from running a small contracting company after his back gave out, but he never really retired in his own mind. He still introduced himself like a man who expected doors to open when he walked through them. My mother, Linda, had built her whole identity around being the kind of woman who looked perfect in church and strategic in private. She loved to call herself a protector. What she meant was she loved control. Growing up, I was the reliable one, the one who stayed home when my brother Travis got to wander, the one who babysat, cleaned, sorted, translated, remembered birthdays, sent flowers, and apologized first. Travis was the golden child because he was loud and charming and easy to show off. I was the daughter who did things without being asked, which meant nobody noticed when I was exhausted. After Daniel died, my parents rushed in like rescuers. At first, I was grateful. Who wouldn't be? They brought casseroles I didn't eat, sat with Noah when I had double shifts, and told me things like, "You just need to rest, honey," and "We're here for you," and "Let us take some of the burden off." I believed them. I even cried in my car one night because my mother had picked Noah up from school and had a hot meal waiting when I got home. That was the version of the story they told people. The version where they were selfless grandparents helping a young widow survive. The private version was different. The private version started small. My mother began asking questions about Daniel's trust. Not directly at first. She wrapped it in concern. "Have you met with the attorney about Noah's account? Do you know exactly how much is in there? I just want to make sure nobody takes advantage of you." Then it got less subtle. "Claire, if something happened and you weren't able to work for a while, wouldn't it make sense for us to manage the trust temporarily?" I remember staring at her from my kitchen table while Noah colored a fire truck at the counter. "Why would something happen to me?" Her smile didn't change. "Oh, sweetheart, people get sick, people get overwhelmed. It's just practical." Practical. That was her favorite word when she was trying to make cruelty sound responsible. I told her no. That should have been the end of it. Instead, it seemed to awaken something in both of them. My father started making comments about my shifts. "You're gone too much. You know a child needs stability. Maybe you should think about reducing hours." I worked at St. Anne's Hospital in medical billing, mostly because the schedule was stable and the benefits were decent. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of job that turned heads at a party. It was just work. Honest work. The kind that paid the mortgage and kept Noah covered under insurance. But in my father's eyes, anything that didn't fit his idea of a mother at home was a failure. "You're letting strangers raise him," he said one night when I got off at 9 p.m. And Noah was already in bed because my mother had helped by putting him down early. "Those strangers are his teachers," I said. "Don't get smart with me." My mother would sigh and touch his arm. "Richard, she's tired." Of course I was tired. I was raising a child while grieving the man I loved. I was working to keep us afloat. I was carrying the invisible weight of everything that had broken. But in their minds, tired meant vulnerable, and vulnerable meant controllable. Then came the little things that made the back of my neck prickle. A missing folder from my desk drawer. A bank statement opened and left face down on the counter. My dad asking, too casually, what date the trust deposit had been made. My mother taking Noah to the pediatrician and asking to be listed as an emergency contact, then later showing me a form that had my signature at the bottom, even though I had never seen it before. I remember holding that form in my hands. "Mom," I said slowly, "did you sign my name?" She looked insulted in the exact way guilty people do when they hope indignation will cover the smell of smoke. "It was just to make the appointment easier. You forged my signature." "For God's sake, Claire, don't be dramatic. It was for Noah." No, I said, and I heard myself getting sharper. It was because you think rules don't apply to you. My father walked in from the living room, heard the tension, and immediately chose violence in the form of tone. What's the problem now? I held up the paper. Your wife signed my name. He glanced at it, then at my mother, then said, If you'd answered your phone, we wouldn't have had to. I stared at him. That was when I understood something important. This wasn't about helping. This was about replacing me. They wanted the role, the access, the authority, the emotional control. They wanted to become the center of Noah's life and turn me into a temporary inconvenience they could explain away. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I started saying no more often. No to unscheduled sleepovers. No to them taking Noah on random weekend trips. No to handing over insurance paperwork. No to just a little access to Daniel's trust. Every no came with more pressure, more guilt, more manipulation. My mother began crying in conversation whenever I pushed back. My father began speaking about me like I was unstable when he thought I couldn't hear him. She's not coping. She's grieving badly. She's working herself into the ground. She needs help. Help. They said it like a weapon. The problem with people who love control is that they mistake resistance for proof they're right. They don't hear your boundaries. They hear a challenge. And challenges, in my father's world, were things to be crushed. I didn't know exactly what they were planning until 3 weeks before the day I walked into that law office. That afternoon, Noah's school called. He'd been picked up early by my mother, which wasn't unusual, except the front office said she had asked whether she could sign as guardian on a field trip permission form that she wasn't authorized to sign. The secretary sounded uneasy. She said she was trying to help since you're so busy, the woman told me. A chill slid straight through my chest. I drove there immediately, still wearing my hospital badge, and found Noah in the after-school program, eating crackers and drawing a volcano. He was fine. That was the worst part. He was completely fine, while I stood there trying not to fall apart. When I got home that night, I checked my email and found a message from an attorney I didn't recognize. The subject line read, Regarding guardianship proceedings. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. The email was short and polite and devastating. It informed me that my parents had scheduled an appointment the next morning to discuss temporary custodial transfer options in the best interest of Noah Monroe. Attached was a preliminary petition with a signature line where my name should have been. I read it 3 times before the meaning sank in. They weren't just talking. They were filing. I sat on the edge of my bed with the laptop open, Noah asleep down the hall, the house so quiet I could hear the fridge cycling on and off, and I understood in one clean, sickening rush that they had been building a case. Photos of me coming home late, messages about my schedule, notes about Noah's behavior after Daniel's death. A narrative. They had been creating a narrative. The next morning, I did something I had never done in my life. I called in sick. Then I drove straight to my friend Denise's house, handed Noah off to her with a trembling apology, and went to the attorney's office address from the email. That was how I ended up in the doorway while my mother smiled over my stolen life. The attorney stood fully now, recovering his composure. Mrs. Monroe, perhaps we should reschedule. No, I said. My father rose too, his face hardening into something ugly and familiar. You need to listen for once in your life. I laughed again, though there was no humor in it. Listen, you tried to get custody of my child without telling me. We were worried, my mother said, using that soft voice she used when she wanted everyone to think she was the victim. You've been under stress. Then you talk to me. You don't ambush me in a lawyer's office. The notary, a woman with careful eyes and a neat bun, looked between us and slowly set the stamp down. Smart woman. She'd sensed the air change. The attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Monroe, I need to verify whether the signature on the petition is yours. It is not, I said. My father slammed his hand flat on the table. Don't lie in here. We have enough proof that you're overwhelmed. Proof? I repeated. From who? You? The people trying to take my son? Claire, my mother pleaded, and I hated how practiced the pleading sounded. You're making this harder than it has to be. That was when I pulled my phone from my purse and tapped the screen. I had already started recording. The room changed. My father saw the red light and looked like he might actually lunge at me. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. The attorney went still. Say that again, I told her. Tell the lawyer exactly why you're trying to take my child. My father pointed a finger at me. Turn that off. No. Claire, I'm warning you. I took another step in, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. You forged my signature. You scheduled a guardianship hearing behind my back. You tried to use my work schedule as evidence that I'm neglectful, while you were the ones watching my son without permission. Enough, my father snapped. The attorney finally found his voice. Sir, if these allegations are true, we need to stop this immediately. My mother's face flushed. They're not allegations. She's unstable. Mom, I said, and the word came out wrecked. What are you doing? For 1 second, something in her expression shifted. I saw shame there, real shame, and then my father's hand touched her elbow, and whatever softness had been trying to rise died under his grip. This is for Noah's protection, he said. You've been making poor decisions. Like what? I said. Like working? Like paying my bills? Like keeping him safe after you tried to steal him from me? You're hysterical, he barked. That was his favorite move, whenever a woman got too close to the truth. He called her hysterical. I looked straight at the attorney. Has anyone signed anything here besides them? Not yet, the notary said quietly. Good, I said, because you should know there's going to be an investigation. My father gave a short, ugly laugh. On what basis? I held up my phone. On the basis that I have this conversation. On the basis that you've been forging documents. On the basis that I just got an email saying you were about to file a petition built on lies. The attorney blinked. Mr. Monroe, did you disclose that Mrs. Monroe had not been informed? My mother turned on my father so fast it shocked me. You told me it was only for emergency planning, she hissed. He glared at her. Don't start. I watched them for half a second and understood there was already a crack in their alliance. They hadn't come in here with the exact same reason. My father had brought the idea. My mother had let herself be dragged into it, probably because she hated the idea of me making decisions without her permission, and because she still mistook obedience for love. He was the one driving. She was the one trying not to be left behind. That didn't make her innocent. It just made the rot more complicated. I turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. If you ever approach my son's school again, I said, my voice shaking but steady enough to carry. If you ever sign my name again, if you ever try to tell anyone I'm unfit, I will make sure every lie you've ever told gets dragged into daylight. My father sneered. You think you can threaten us? No, I said. I think I can prove you wrong. I walked out before my knees gave way. By the time I reached my car, I was crying so hard I could barely see through the windshield. But I didn't go home. I drove straight to the police station. The officer at the front desk was kind, in that exhausted professional way civil servants often are when they've already seen too much family disaster for one lifetime. I gave him the email, the recording, the petition, the copied form with the forged signature, and a printed bank statement I had found that morning showing a withdrawal from Noah's account I had never authorized. He listened carefully, then got very still. Who had access to this account? He asked. My mother watched Noah sometimes. She claimed she was helping. And your father? He knew enough to ask questions. The officer nodded once. We're going to need copies of everything. That was the beginning. But it was not the end. Because once people realize you've noticed them, they stop pretending. That night, my parents called 12 times. I didn't answer. Then they started texting. My mother first. Claire, please. You've misunderstood everything. Your father is trying to protect Noah. We only wanted to help. Your reaction is making this much worse. Your father gets upset because he loves that child. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, then set the phone down and walked into Noah's room. He was sleeping on his side with one hand curled under his cheek and his dinosaur blanket bunched around his legs. The sight of him made something in me break cleanly open. Not the panicked, sharp kind of breaking. The deeper kind. The kind that rearranges you. I sat on the edge of his bed and brushed hair off his forehead. "I'm sorry," I whispered. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he was 6 and already had to learn that the adults he trusted most might not deserve it. In the days that followed, the truth came apart piece by piece. The lawyer's office confirmed my parents had brought in preliminary paperwork using a notary service they'd used before for business matters. The police confirmed my mother's signature on the emergency request was shaky enough to warrant a handwriting review. My bank confirmed that someone had accessed the transaction history for Noah's trust using information they should not have had. And then, the biggest part landed. The withdrawals. Not huge ones at first. Small enough to slip past a casual glance. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. Enough to look like administrative fees if you didn't know what you were seeing. Enough to buy time. Enough to hide in ordinary behavior. I froze when I saw the dates. Some of the withdrawals had happened while my mother was helping watch Noah. I knew immediately what that meant. She'd been using the access I gave her to skim information and feed it back to my father. He had been planning this for longer than I knew. I hired a family attorney named Evelyn Shaw, a woman with sharp eyes, silver streaks in her hair, and no patience for nonsense. She looked through the documents, looked at me, and said, "You were right to come in now. If they'd gotten temporary guardianship, they would have had leverage before the court ever heard your side." "Can they really do that?" I asked, horrified. "People can try anything," she said. "That doesn't mean they succeed." She helped me file an emergency motion to block the petition and request an audit of the trust activity. She also advised me to document everything, every call, every text, every school issue, every time they showed up uninvited. For 2 days, my parents didn't come near the house. Then my father showed up at my work. I was standing at the copier when a coworker came to get me. "Your dad is in the lobby," she whispered. My stomach sank. "Did he say why he's here?" "He wants to talk to you. He's pretty heated." Of course he was. I walked to the lobby with my entire body braced, and there he was in a brown blazer, his face red, his hands spread like he was the injured party. "Claire," he said too loudly, "we need to settle this." I kept my voice flat. "There's nothing to settle." He stepped closer. "You humiliated your mother in front of strangers. You tried to take my son. He'd be better off with us." That sentence hit like a slap. I felt every eye in the lobby turn in our direction, but I didn't care anymore. Better off, based on what? Your debt? Your lies? Your forged documents? His nostrils flared. "You think you're so righteous, but you barely keep that house together. You're gone all the time." "He's lonely." "He's not lonely when he's with me. He needs stability." I stared at him. "No. He needs you to stop trying to turn him into a prize." His voice dropped. "You don't understand what's at stake." There it was. The crack again. I narrowed my eyes. "What is at stake?" He looked away for half a second. Just enough. And I knew. "This is about money," I said. He snapped his head back. "Don't insult me. You're using my child to get access to something." He took a step toward me, lowering his voice into the intimate tone he always used right before a blow-up. "Your husband left that trust sitting there and you've been making emotional decisions with it. We could have handled things better." "Handled what?" He stared at me, jaw tight, and for one terrifying second I thought he might actually tell the truth. Instead, he said, "Go home and think about what you're doing to this family." Then he walked out. 2 hours later, my attorney called. "There's something else," Evelyn said. Her voice was clipped, professional, dangerous. "What?" "Your father is under investigation for business irregularities. It appears he's carrying debt he hasn't disclosed publicly." I gripped my desk. "What kind of debt?" "Significant enough that if someone took guardianship of your son, he may have tried to control the trust through that route. We're still confirming the details." I went cold all over. So that was it. Not just control for control's sake. Control because he was drowning. Later, We learned he had taken out high-interest loans to keep his business afloat after several clients stopped paying. Then he'd used a combination of old company accounts and a shell arrangement with a contractor friend to shift money around, hoping to stay ahead of the collapse. The trust fund, the one he kept asking about, had become more than temptation. It had become escape. If he could get legal access to Noah, even temporary, he could get leverage over the money connected to him. He could look legitimate while using my child as cover. When I heard that, I felt nauseous. My father hadn't just wanted to raise my son. He had wanted to stand in the doorway of my grief and pickpocket the future. My mother called the next day and left 12 voicemail messages. I didn't listen to all of them, but one line from the first one stayed with me. You have to understand. Your father got desperate. Desperate. Another word people use when they want pity to soften the shape of a crime. I saved the message anyway. 3 days later, I got the real twist. Not from the police. From my mother. She came to my house alone. No makeup, no perfect hair, no polished church lady armor. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her, and for a second, I almost didn't recognize her. I opened the door only because Noah was at Denise's house, and I didn't want her making a scene on the porch. She held out her hands the moment I stepped outside. Please, she said, let me talk to you. I'm listening. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Your father told me the trust was only for Noah's school years. He said he was trying to protect him from bad decisions. He said if we didn't act, you might spend it all out of grief. I stared at her. And you believed him? She swallowed hard. I believed he knew more than I did. That's not the same thing. No, it isn't. Her voice cracked. But that's how it started. For a second, I thought maybe I was about to hear an apology. What I got instead was worse. She looked down at her hands. He's been in trouble before. I didn't move. What kind of trouble? I asked. She hesitated. And I knew then that this was the part she'd been saving because she hoped telling me would buy her mercy. Years ago, she said, before you were married, he took money from a subcontracting account to cover a job that went bad. He paid it back eventually. Nobody found out. I stared at her, stunned. What? He said it was temporary. He said it was the only way to keep the company alive. That is theft. I know, and you stayed. She lifted her chin defensively, but the fire was weak. We had children. We had a life. You stayed, I repeated, colder now. And then you taught me to worship the kind of man who lies and steals and calls it protection. Her face changed. That hit home. I saw it. She stepped back, as if I'd shoved her, and for the first time I felt the weight of something I had never let myself fully examine. My mother had not just been victim to my father's control, she had also been his accomplice, because it was easier than admitting the life she built was rotten at the foundation. I wanted to help you, she whispered. No, I said. You wanted to help him. Her eyes filled again. Claire, please, did you think taking Noah would fix your husband's debt? She said nothing. That was answer enough. I nodded slowly, every part of me going terribly still. Get off my porch. She reached out as if to touch my arm, then stopped herself. That little boy is my grandson, she said, trying one last time to sound like a loving grandmother instead of a cornered conspirator. And he is not your shield. She started crying then. Not the graceful tears she used in front of people, but ugly, desperate ones. I did not comfort her. I could not. I had spent too long mistaking her distress for conscience. She left that afternoon with shaking hands and no dignity left to borrow. The next week, my father's business records started surfacing. The auditors found unpaid taxes, falsified invoices, and money shifted through a side account tied to a cousin's company. It wasn't enough to put him away forever, but it was enough to wreck him publicly. The petition for guardianship was dismissed before it ever reached the hearing, because Evelyn tore it apart with the evidence we collected. Forged signatures, unauthorized access, misrepresented claims about my work schedule, and a bank trail that proved my parents had a financial motive. But the legal victory didn't feel like peace yet, because peace would have required them to understand what they'd done. And they didn't. Not at first. My father tried, one last time, 2 days before the dismissal became public. He called my cell phone from a number I almost didn't answer. "Pick up," he said the second I did. "What do you want? Your attorney's making this worse." I laughed once. "You mean she's exposing it? This family is going to be destroyed. You destroyed it." He exhaled hard through his nose. "I gave you everything." That line, that one, had been in his mouth my whole life. As if providing food and a roof somehow bought obedience forever. "You gave me conditions," I said. "You gave me control disguised as love. You gave me a mother who treats guilt like currency. And now you tried to use my son to cover your lies." His silence lasted half a beat too long. Then he said, "I was trying to keep the family together. You were trying to keep yourself out of trouble. That trust would have covered everything." There it was. The truth. Finally. From the darkest corner. I felt my whole body go still. "You were going to use Noah's money," I said. "He's a child. He doesn't need all of that sitting there. He doesn't need his grandfather stealing from him either. I'm your father." "No," I said. "A father protects his family. You hunted it." The line went dead. When the official dismissal came through, it did not come with a neat bow or a courtroom showdown worthy of television. Real life was less dramatic and more brutal in a quieter way. My father was forced to resign from the business he had built his identity around. Several clients pulled contracts after hearing about the fraud investigation. The bank froze accounts. The state filed civil penalties. His old friends, the ones who used to slap his back and laugh too loud at barbecues, disappeared one by one as soon as the money smell vanished. He didn't go to prison, but the humiliation was worse in some ways. Prison gives a man a story. Public disgrace gives him a mirror. My mother filed for legal separation 3 weeks later. That shocked me more than almost anything. She never admitted she was leaving because she'd been complicit. She said she was leaving because she could not watch him destroy what remains of the family. But I saw the truth in the way she avoided the word divorce. She had lived too long in the shape of him to call things by their actual names. She showed up once, after the separation, to drop off Noah's backpack, from a visit Evelyn had arranged under strict supervision. Noah was in the other room with a puzzle and didn't hear her enter. My mother looked around my kitchen like she was seeing the house for the first time without the fog of entitlement. "Claire," she said softly, "I'm sorry." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "For what part?" Tears gathered in her eyes, but this time they didn't seem staged. That made them harder to look at, not easier. For not stopping him, for believing him, for letting him use me. "You signed my name, I know. You tried to take my child, I know." She nodded as if each word hurt in a new place. I keep thinking, if I'd been braver, this never would have happened. I let that sit between us. Then I said, "You weren't brave. You were comfortable." She flinched. "And comfort cost my son his sense of safety," I continued. "So I need you to understand something. You don't get to cry your way back into the family. You don't get to apologize and skip the damage." Her mouth trembled. "I know. Do you?" She looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I believed she might actually know very little at all. "I want to earn back even a piece of trust," she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment and thought about Noah, about the way children remember who showed up and who didn't, about the way they absorb adult lies like weather. So I gave her the truth she could actually live with. "You can start by telling Noah the truth when he's old enough," I said. "Not your version. The truth. You can tell him you were wrong. You can tell him his mother fought for him. And you can stay away until I decide you've earned a place in his life." She nodded slowly, tears sliding down her cheeks. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a path. And I needed her to know that after what she'd done, a path was more mercy than she had earned. Months passed, then a year. The trust was placed under tighter oversight with a separate fiduciary, one my parents could never touch. My father's name became a cautionary footnote in local business circles. My mother began working part-time at a florist downtown, which sounded almost poetic until I learned it was the only job she could get that didn't require references she no longer had. Noah got older. Children do that without asking permission from the wreckage around them. He started first grade with 2 big sneakers and a backpack full of carefully labeled pencils. He asked fewer questions than I feared he would. Kids sense when adults are building something fragile around them and often choose kindness over curiosity. I changed too. I stopped answering every guilt-driven call. I stopped saying yes to every family emergency. I stopped confusing being necessary with being loved. I got a new job with steadier hours and more dignity, even if it meant less money at first. I painted the living room a warm color Daniel would have hated and probably made fun of, because grief shouldn't dictate the rest of your life forever. I learned how to ask for help from people who didn't weaponize it later. Denise became more like family than blood had ever managed to be. And one Saturday afternoon, nearly 14 months after the day at the lawyer's office, Noah and I were sitting on the front steps eating popsicles when he looked up at me and asked, "Mom?" "Yeah, baby? Why doesn't Grandma Linda come over like before?" There it was. The first real question. I took a breath and chose my words carefully, because children deserve honesty, but not cruelty disguised as it. "Grandma made some very bad choices," I said. "She hurt our trust, and trust is something we have to rebuild slowly." Noah considered that, his blue popsicle melting down his wrist. "Did she hurt you?" I almost said no because I wanted to spare him, but I didn't. Not this time. "Yes," I said. "She did." He looked out at the street, processing with the solemn seriousness children have when they realize adults can be both loving and dangerous. Then he asked, "Did you still keep me?" My throat tightened so fast I had to swallow twice before speaking. "Always," I said. "Every time. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." He nodded, satisfied in the way only children can be when the answer finally lands where they need it. A few seconds later, he leaned against my arm and said, "Okay." That one word cracked me open in the best possible way. Because that was the whole victory, really. Not the court order, not the exposure, not the collapse of my father's carefully built image. It was this. My son knew I had not sold him, surrendered him, or let anyone turn him into an asset. He knew I had stayed. In the months after that, my mother sent one letter, handwritten, no excuses, no request for immediate forgiveness. She wrote that she had finally understood the difference between keeping peace and keeping truth hidden. She wrote that she had spent too many years calling fear loyalty. She wrote that she did not ask to be absolved, only remembered honestly. I kept the letter in a drawer, not because it fixed anything, because it didn't, but because it was the first time she had told the truth without trying to package it for her own benefit. As for my father, karma did not arrive with dramatic sirens or a prison jumpsuit. Real karma rarely does. It came in smaller, more personal ways. It came when the clients he once bullied stopped taking his calls. It came when he walked into a hardware store he'd frequented for 20 years and nobody greeted him by name. It came when the little empire he built out of intimidation and charm stopped working because people finally looked past the performance and saw the paperwork. It came when his own brother refused to lend him money after the audit became public. And it came, most of all, when I learned he had tried to tell people I had abandoned Noah because I was emotionally unstable. That lie spread for about 12 hours before it collapsed under the weight of the evidence. I did not chase him for an apology. I did not beg him to understand. I simply stood in the reality he had tried to destroy and kept living in it. That was revenge enough. There is a kind of justice that doesn't feel like a courtroom win or a shouting match. It feels like waking up on a quiet morning and realizing the fear is gone from your chest. It feels like hearing your child laugh in the next room, without wondering who might steal the moment. It feels like being able to say your own name without flinching. I used to think the worst pain in my life was losing Daniel. I was wrong. The worst pain was finding out how far my own parents would go when they decided my grief could be turned into opportunity. But the pain gave me something else, too. It gave me clarity. It taught me that love without respect is just ownership in softer clothes. It taught me that family is not a bloodline, it is a behavior. And it taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your child is refuse to let the people who failed you define what safety looks like. Noah is 10 now. He still keeps Daniel's old flashlight on his nightstand. He still laughs with his whole body. He still asks hard questions at the worst possible times, like when we're in the cereal aisle or brushing teeth. A few weeks ago, he asked me whether people can change. I told him yes. Then, I told him the harder truth. Some people only change when life takes away the power they were using to hurt others. He thought about that, then nodded like it made sense. Maybe it did. My mother sees him occasionally, supervised, and only because I chose not to let her mistakes become his lifelong story. She is careful now, quieter, more honest. Sometimes I can even see the guilt sitting on her face without her trying to hide it. I don't trust her the way I once did, and maybe I never will again. But she is trying in a way she never did before, because she finally understands that there are consequences to pretending love is the same as control. My father and I do not speak. I used to think that would make me feel empty. Instead, it feels like freedom. Not pretty freedom. Not the kind people post about online. Real freedom. The kind that arrives after you stop begging a person to become decent and start protecting the life they tried to break. And every so often, when the house is quiet, and Noah is asleep, and the streetlights shine across the kitchen floor, I remember that day in the lawyer's office. My mother's pen hovering above my child's future. My father's hand on the folder. The notary's stamp waiting. And me, walking in at the exact moment my family thought they had me cornered. They thought I would collapse. They thought I would be too tired, too scared, too grateful for scraps to fight back. Instead, I caught them in the middle of the act, and by the time they realized I was serious, the damage had already turned on them.